What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today, we have our fourth installment of the Scouting Steelers series, going over NFL draft prospects, just a couple weeks away from draft week at that. Really just want to try to give you guys like basically my scouting reports on all these guys that have top 30 confirmed visits to the Steelers facility, knowing, just how important these visits typically are for, prospects to kind of land in the Berg. Today, we're going to be going over one of the most fascinating players really in the 2024 NFL draft, and that's Georgia offensive tackle Amarius Mims. Just judging by my mentions on Twitter all the time, my YouTube comments, I know this is a guy that a lot of you guys are in love with as well. Very fascinating evaluation process. Probably the prospect that I've watched the most pure reps on for obvious reasons. One, I think Mims is a very, very good player. I find him extremely intriguing, but also just, the Steelers have been heavily interested in him throughout the process, as you would probably expect. But I want to go over, his scouting reports. We're going to go strengths, weaknesses, kind of my projection, my grade that I finalized for him. And then we'll talk some Steelers specific stuff at the end of the video. Just before we get started, please make sure that you like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications. All that good stuff is greatly appreciated on my end. And let's get started, man. So Amarius Mims, Georgia offensive tackle, true junior, one of the few underclassmen that we actually have in this class. He won't even turn 22 years old until mid-October. So this dude's still a pup. Steelers formal at the combine. Mike Tomlin, Omar Khan, and Arthur Smith all at the UGA Pro Day. And then a top 30 confirmed visit to the facility as well. Now, Mims did not participate at the Georgia Pro Day. He was still working his way back from a tweaked injury at the combine, but he is scheduled to have his individual pro day on, I believe, April 10th, which is a couple days away from the time I'm recording this. But he's been working with offensive line masterminds with Duke Manyweather in the offseason. But this is a really, really good player, man. Just kind of going over some of the measurables. Dude was built in a lab. I stood next to this dude in Indianapolis at the combine when I was covering the Avengers. Now, they're like, this dude's a freak show. He's just 2 inches shy of 6'8", 340 pounds. There's just no bad weight on this dude. He has an absolutely like Herculean build almost. Over 36-inch arms, 11-inch hands. All the above are in the 90th or above percentile for offensive tackles. Pretty much if you were to craft an offensive tackle from scratch, this is what they would look like. He ran a 5.07 40-yard dash, a 1.77 10-yard split, both extremely good numbers in the elite range for the position. He jumped over 9 feet in the broad jump and finished with a 9.59 relative athletic score. If you guys aren't familiar with RAS, please check out MathBomb on Twitter. Definitely support his work. He does awesome work kind of trying to contextualize athleticism for the NFL. Just some of the numbers, man. 800 career snaps, all of which have been at right tackle. He had 297 of those came last year. 168 pass blocking snaps. He only allowed 1 pressure and never allowed a sack in his entire college career. So extremely interesting profile just when you look at him, the athletic profile, the way he's built. But, scouting report, man, like I was just reading through some of my notes from prior to the combine when I watched him originally. And, it's hard to, I usually don't gush about prospects like this as long or as much. But for an underclassman, just without much game experience, man, he's a lot more polished of a pass protector than you would anticipate. I know a lot of people have kind of categorized him as raw, but I do not actually 100% agree with that assessment. I think he's more inexperienced than he is raw. Silky smooth athlete, just glides out of his stance, can hit his landmarks with ease. The length, obviously, I mentioned he has 36-inch arms, huge asset. He can regularly establish first contact when appropriate, but he's just really patient with his hands, particularly with his outside hands, where you'll see him use bait or flash techniques to get rushers to kind of declare intentions around the edge. He just rarely looks challenged with speed. Anytime I saw people trying to win the outside shoulder against him, run up the arc, he had no problem dealing with that. Plenty of range in his arsenal, uses his length to guide rushers up the arc past the pocket. Typically what I look for when I'm scouting tackles is, can you at least protect up to the, 9-yard range? That's about the range that I want you to be able to protect, because that's what they're going to be dealing with at the NFL level. He was consistently pushing guys up 10, 11, 12 yards. And like I said, I don't even know if I saw anyone beat him around the corner in like I said, I watched most of his reps from last season at some point, but at least 5 or 6 full games, I don't think anyone beat him with speed. Really strong base and a frame, just some absolutely dominant reps against power rushers, man. Like there are some reps where it almost looks like he's not even trying, and then he just locks these guys up, and to the point where it's almost like comical, to be honest with you. Guys that consistently try to win with speed to power, not happening. You try to run through the middle of his chest, not happening. He just transitions really quickly, almost instantly, to his anchor. Gives up zero ground. I mean, some guys they require kind of that one hop or two hops backwards to kind of establish position. Not Mims. It's usually about a half step, and he's already got control of the rusher. Even some of the more powerful guys that I saw him go up against couldn't really generate a lot of displacement on him. Good hand placement, grip strength, obviously 11-inch hands. You can tell, like, whenever he gets into these close combat engagements, he gets his hands high and then tight. He can just kind of control blockers, and pretty much once he gets his hands on you, the rep's over. That's pretty much how everything went last year in the SEC. Very intelligent. One of the things that I did not anticipate, and I really didn't get a good feel for until really scouting him. I would say like right before their bowl game was he handles stunts and twists like a pro, man. Like highly intelligent, really good feel for passing off rushers to the guard, catches loopers, catches crashers, just really high IQ player, man, for a guy who hasn't played a ton of ball. Targeting system in space, there's some highlight reel worthy blocks on screens, man. Like he caught a body in the Ohio State playoff game 2 years ago. That was really my first kind of interaction in terms of watching him. He was fantastic in that game. Had a highlight reel worthy block a couple last year as well. But he's a real huge asset on screens where you really get to see his athleticism shine. In the run game, he's a natural knee bender. He consistently drives defenders out of their gaps. Down blocks, double teams. He can create displacement. Good play strength, obviously. He could turn and steal defenders away from the play design. You know, there's just a lot to like with his profile, man. I know you can probably read that, and I did this morning when I went back and read some of my notes, and I'm thinking like, man, this dude sounds like a number one overall pick, but that's just his tape is really good. I don't want that to be misconstrued. In terms of the negatives, man, there's really not a lot, and some of this stuff is honestly pretty nitpicky. I thought in the run game, there are times where he looks unsure of where he's supposed to be and who he's supposed to block. I don't think there are obviously some helmet scouters out there that would have compared him to Broderick as like these high upside tackles, but they're actually very different players. I think um, with Mims, I think he just has a habit of playing too tall, and his base can get a little bit narrow in the run game. Obviously, he's 6'7", almost 6'8", so you can kind of understand why he appears to be lunging more often than not. Honestly, and he falls off blocks really easily right now. Even like the difference between him and Broderick are like Broderick to me, I think you just saw like more natural power in his hands and just more of an impact and ready-made run blocker, whereas Mims is a little bit more of a work in progress in that situation. In terms of when he's in pass protection, the only times he was really beat in drop back situations was basically always on the inside track. So there's some oversets of him not setting to the right landmark or not keeping his shoulder square to the rusher or just improper weight distribution and being too heavy on his outside foot. If you really want to get a good feel for kind of where he struggles in pass protection, and I really wouldn't even call it struggles. It was really just one game that I noticed it in particular was the Tennessee game. There was just a lot of rushers that seemed like on the scouting report that I kind of figured out how to set him up a little bit. And it didn't take a lot, but when he was having to mirror those guys to the inside, there was some struggles. In terms of recovery ability and mirror skills, I think they're solid, but I do think it's worth keeping an eye on against more of the physically gifted rushers who understand how to set guys up like you'll see at the NFL level. One of the difficult parts of Mims evaluation is with there being such a small sample size of snaps, it's difficult because you only get to see him display these things a handful of times. So trying to figure out these weaknesses, if they're actually a weakness or if it's just a one-off type of thing, is a little bit more difficult with him than say some of these other guys in this class, the tackles that have been starting for 3-4 years, didn't have to wait their turn. So like that's just worth noting. He is a two-hand puncher. So like you don't see a ton of independent hand usage. That's something that Steelers offensive line coach Pat Mayer kind of preaches a lot in his philosophy. So that's going to be an adjustment period. We saw the same thing with Broderick Jones last year, who's also, a two-hand puncher. A lot of these guys that come out of college, they don't really necessarily need to rely as much on the independent hands. But it's something that he's going to have to kind of tweak a little bit at the next level and just get more comfortable with, which that's a coachable thing. It's a teachable thing. It's not, to me, it doesn't even really belong in the weaknesses category. It's just something that he needs to be taught. And then, really, the biggest part of Mims' evaluation that I think, it's been on the ground at this point is just the durability aspect, right? So he needed tightrope surgery in 2023. He left multiple games early that I watched. He left the Alabama game early, the Tennessee game early. And then I think there was even maybe one or two more where he missed like a couple of snaps, but ended up re-entering the game. He also tweaked his hamstring at the combine. So this is a guy who, if you want to know why he only played 800 snaps at Georgia, the reason is because Georgia's had some really good offensive tackles that have went to the league, and he had to kind of wait his time in that regard. But also, even this year, where we were really anticipating this huge jump forward because we knew he was talented. I mean, if you saw the Ohio State game in the playoffs, 2022, where he stepped in for McClendon, the right tackle, he was dominant in that game. I mean, the second half of that game was a total freak show. I mean, once he got comfortable, and this is a game where he was playing on the same offensive line as Broderick Jones, who was a top 15 pick last year. He looked like the best player on the field at some points against NFL caliber pass rushers. Ohio State's had 3 or 4 guys on the roster that are either already in the NFL or will be. So, and he looked like he belonged. He was 20 years old doing this. I mean, total freak show. But if you're wondering why, like, we just haven't seen a lot of it, is just because he hasn't been able to stay on the field, unfortunately. And that's a really big bummer, honestly, which definitely clouds his evaluation. But that's the durability thing is the biggest unknown part of his profile. Overall, fascinating case study. I feel like there's a wide range of potential outcomes in his future. I wouldn't be surprised, man, if we look back at this draft class 5 years from now, and Mims is one of the 5 best players. Like, it really is that simple to me. I think he's so talented, so gifted, and he has everything that you could possibly want in terms of being one of the best pass protecting tackles in the entire NFL. He's a blank canvas, physical gifts just off the charts. Offensive line coaches dream of, to be honest with you. Talents like this at this position, everybody wants tackles who are capable of, just succeeding on an island. And Mims can already do that. And the thing is, like, he's nowhere near how good he could potentially be with more time and development. And, normally these types of talents, even with, I feel like if he was a little bit more experienced, or if he didn't have the durability issues, like, you just don't see guys like this consistently available outside the top 10. In fact, you really rarely ever do, to be honest with you. His lack of experience doesn't really scare me as much as I think it does some other people or some other evaluators, because the film is already very good. I think that the things that he could do already are really impressive. He put up some dominant performances, like I mentioned, against NFL caliber athletes at a really young age. The lack of durability, though, it's downright terrifying, to be honest with you. And then there's a very real chance that he's not ever able to consistently stay on the field long enough for him to really reach his ceiling or reach his sky high potential. That's obviously a risk. And, I'm always somebody, if you've ever followed me on Twitter, read anything I've wrote, watched the YouTube videos, or just listen to my thoughts on the draft, I'm always someone who's going to be shooting for the stars in the first round, particularly with elite athletes at premier positions. But I will acknowledge that this is a player that could come back and, smack me in the face years down the road and say, what were you thinking? The signs were there. Because here's the thing, if Mims misses, or if he doesn't end up staying healthy, you can't really make excuses about it, because it was there in college. It's not like one of those situations where a guy was just completely healthy and had no red flags from a durability standpoint, and then goes into the NFL and he suffers, unfortunately, 2 or 3 freak injuries and he's out of the league in 3 or 4 years. It's a very well documented point in a scouting report. If he isn't able to stay healthy, you can't say that you didn't know about it. He does carry a first round grade for me, because I don't factor in injuries as a significant part of my grading scale, but also just because I'm super comfortable betting in. I just think that I personally value pass protection ability heavily, especially if you have the length, athleticism, and size like this dude has. And I feel like if he can just even become a league average type of run blocker, the value is just absolutely absurd outside the top 10. I mean, if he's available at pick 20 when the Steelers are up, I cannot imagine a scenario where they just don't sprint the card up immediately and do backflips. Now, after they do the backflips on the stage, they may all go back to the conference room and do a little prayer circle for this dude's health and that he can actually stay healthy, because they may need it. But for me personally, man, like it's not a surprise to me that they've spent so much time investing in trying to get to know this kid. And there's very few red flags or even bad habits in his profile. I think that is one sort of semi good thing about a player with the lack of experience that he has is he hasn't really had enough time to develop a ton of bad habits, which is sometimes when guys get to the league and they've played 2,500 snaps, but they've got a couple fatal flaws or a couple significant things that they need to work on. It's almost more difficult on offensive line coaches because they've got to beat those bad habits out of them, right? With Mims, there's just not really a ton there outside of getting beat inside by some inside counters or some jab steps. I just don't really see a lot that really concern me a ton. And I believe he's super talented, man. It wouldn't surprise me again. I think that there's a legitimate chance that Mims could be the first. I mean, maybe not first. I think Joe Alt's probably going to be the first offensive tackle taken, but it wouldn't surprise me if he's the second offensive tackle taken, and it wouldn't surprise me if he fell out of the top 25, maybe even first round completely, just because some teams may look at the risk and say like this isn't something that I want to take on. This is too big of an investment, and get scared away that this dude just won't ever be on the field, which is a realistic possibility. It's just for me, I'm betting on the traits, I'm betting on the size, and I think that he is already a very good football player and someone that has legitimate Pro Bowl potential. At a position that the Steelers absolutely need to add talent at. They've got Dan Moore at left tackle, Broderick Jones. You could easily, in this scenario, see him or envision him sliding over to left tackle. You can play Mims from day one. I do think that he's capable of starting as a rookie, even with the lack of experience, or you could slowly bring him along, whatever you prefer to do. But I think that getting Broderick and Amarius on the same offensive line, pairing these two really talented players together, two really good athletes, two high ceiling type of prospects. Even if only one of them hit, it's a win. Like you get both of these guys potentially outside the top 10 of a draft. If you get a franchise caliber tackle out of one of these two guys, it's a win. 100%. You take it 10 times out of 10. And there's a realistic, like you can see a path for both of them being very, very good NFL players. And I would be extremely excited about that. You think about the Steelers, with veteran quarterback and Russell Wilson, or who knows who's going to be under center down the road. But I think if you're talking about creating this ecosystem or environment to drop a young quarterback into, maybe it's next year, the year after, whatever, depending on what happens, this is about as good as it gets, man. You draft two tackles really high in the draft with athletic traits, and you hope that you can give them extremely good pass protection. And I would be bullish on that scenario. So I think at this point, he's probably the most likely selection in the first round. But it'll be fun to watch play out. So you guys let me know what you guys think of Amarius Mims, the player, in the comments. Let me know how you guys would feel about them taking him at 20 or even potentially trading up for him like they did for Broderick last year. If you made it to the end of the video, I appreciate you guys. I'm going to try to crank out several of these scouting reports over the course of the week. So if you guys want to see somebody they have a top 30 on, let me know, and I will try to get to all of those players. But like the video, subscribe, turn on notifications, all that good stuff. Just a couple weeks away from the draft. I'm really excited about all that's going to transpire. Should be a really fun time. Appreciate you guys. Peace and love.